This week on Arizona Illustrated, concussions in football, what's being done?
We're blessed enough to have these talents that God's given us to play football, but reality is it's just a game.
Writer and reporter Brian Smith.
Storytelling and writing, and all of it is empathy. That's the word of the day, the year, the century, empathy.
And connecting mothers when they need it most.
It's real, it's loving, it's gentle. For me, God, what a gift. It's like magic watching this happen.
Hi, and welcome to Arizona Stadium. I'm Tom McNamara. If you're a football fan like I am, this is your season to enjoy the games and following your favorite team, like the Wildcats. But there's also something to be concerned about, and that's players' health. Recent studies of the post-mortem brains of NFL players have found clear evidence of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. Now, there's still a lot that scientists don't know, but a study involving the Arizona State University football team hopes to change all that. In 2015, mental health reporter Gisela Tellis went to ASU to find out more.
Good kick. Rolls up. Oh, he gets blasted. The ball is loose, and there's a flag.
It's the impact of a car accident that these professional and collegiate football players are encountering. So on a daily basis, they're going through car accident after car accident after car accident with these games. And those are the impacts that can cause concussion. Well, a concussion, by definition, is alteration of function of the brain when there is an injury to the head.
As a neurologist and a member of the National Football League's Head, Neck, and Spine Committee, Javier Cardenas spends a lot of time thinking about what we know and don't know about concussions. Researchers know that one concussion puts you at greater risk for a second until you recover, and that 98% of those who suffer a concussion do recover. It's what researchers don't know that has put concussions at the center of a controversy.
The controversy is around what's called CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
This disease is caused by microscopic changes in the brain that can lead to memory loss, aggressive behavior, depression, suicidal thoughts, and dementia. CTE has been found in people with a history of repetitive brain trauma, and that has raised concerns about the long-term risks of concussion.
Okay, look straight ahead.
To understand and prevent CTE, Cardenas says we need to understand concussions too, and get better at diagnosing them.
Right now, there's a lot of subjectivity in the diagnosis of concussion, whether or not they have symptoms, whether or not when you're doing an exam you can detect an error in balance or an error in thinking. That's very subjective.
That's where the ASU football team comes in. Cardenas and colleagues at the Translational Genomics Research Institute, including geneticist Matt Huntelman, teamed up with the Sun Devils to search for markers or biological signs of damage to the brain.
The theory here, the concept, is that when your brain experiences an injury, and repeated impacts might be considered an injury, that we would see a change in this chemical in our body that's already there, but we'd see a change. And the chemical that we follow for this study is RNA. It's a sister chemical to DNA, and we use the RNA as our indicator of changes that might be happening in the brain.
Student athletes who volunteer for the study wear special helmets that record every impact they experience by sending signals to a computer on the sidelines.
Can you pee for me? Yeah. Don't fill it up.
It's the day after a football game, and tired student athletes stumble in to see medical assistant Yana Gadayev.
Pee.
Before and after games, and whenever they suffer a concussion, they provide blood, urine, and saliva samples.
Thank you, sir.
And get on with the day.
Appreciate it.
It's become a routine, but every sample offers a clue. to what happens in the brain when players collide. The idea is to search their samples for clues to how collisions on the field alter the brain.
It's really about how the brain reacts to multiple head impacts. And of course, football is a sport that's great to study for that. We care about concussions, of course, but we also care about those athletes that never experience a concussion but get hit a lot. So they have a lot of head impacts. And does that mean that their brain is doing okay? Or is there some injury there that we don't know about? And can we use our biomarkers as an indicator of that? Let's say that the impacts you experienced during the game set you up for a concussion during the practice week. We'd like to know that so we can help those players avoid that concussion, right? So whatever they experienced during the game took them to the very edge, but they didn't tip over into getting a concussion. We want to know that so that on Tuesday, they don't go out and go full-on, full-contact practice.
The team's participation in the study is a chance to help its players and a sign that football is changing. The team now emphasizes safety and awareness more strongly and takes head injuries much more seriously. Techniques have changed too, so that student athletes learn to move and tackle in ways that help them avoid injury. The culture change is significant, but it's also very new. New enough that even the team's young players remember a different approach.
I was a sophomore, junior in high school, and it happened, obviously playing football. When I hit the guy, I literally seen stars, stars just blinking. And, unfortunately, my team needed me, so I kept playing, but I definitely had a concussion.
Before, if you had a headache, it was like, oh, that's probably nothing. It just comes with football.
Cardenas and his colleagues are now in their third year of the concussion study. They hope their results will change the game of concussion diagnosis and treatment, and change the stakes for those who face the greatest risks.
Crumple zones, airbags, seatbelt usage, stability control are all things that have contributed to the safety of cars so that motor vehicle crashes are no longer the #1 cause of brain injury. The #1 cause of brain injury right now is a fall. The same can be said for sports activity. So you think about all the things that can change with a sports activity, including changing the way people tackle, changing the rules of the game, improving the helmets, improving techniques so that you reduce the risk of injury.
No one wants football to go away. We're all football fans. But we want to make the game safer for the players. We want to extend their careers and keep them on the field. We can still have the game we love, but have it be safe for the players to participate in for decades of their life. We have to find that right balance.
That's a balance that more and more young players are eager to strike.
And we're blessed enough to have these talents that God's given us to play football, but at the same time, reality is it's just a game. It would be a tragedy. It would be a tragedy if you were to, get hit so many times or deliver blows so many times that, you can't even think straight, 20 years down the road.
Tucson-based writer and reporter Brian Smith weaves words and stories about the city he observes in his own often heartbreaking language. His new book, Tucson Salvage, is a collection of his stories from his column in the Tucson Weekly, where he takes on the fragile, difficult, and unseen stories in our midst.
I grew up on the east side of Tucson, and even as a little kid, I understood that there was a quality about Tucson that was so powerful. That weird afternoon brassy Arizona light that I've only ever experienced here. For some reason, it's a signal of depression. My first memory of that is trying to explain it to my mother when I was 3. The feeling is like a pervasive inescapable melancholia. It's like a deep sadness. It's just something that has been with me. It's been my passenger my entire life. I'm driving around Tucson right now looking for a story because I don't have anything to write for my column this week. For me, sometimes finding the best stories involves just driving around until something looks interesting. Half the reason why I moved to Tucson was to commit suicide. It's like, oh, this is the place of my birth. I was absolutely like at the bottom of the well and the walls were slippery. It was that kind of thing. And the only person I talked to was Mari Herreras, the editor of Tucson Weekly, and she said, okay, I'll give you a column.
I had heard he was thinking of moving back to Tucson a while back, and I remember folks at the Weekly, we were really excited. There was no way I could say no to that possibility.
We can cruise down 22nd Street, which is probably my favorite strip in all of Tucson.
No amount of gentrification can ever change certain aspects of life here. And I think that's one of the things that Brian finds in his stories.
I'm not into writing about celebrities. I'm not going to write about somebody who's famous or somebody who's got something to sell. I'm not interested in any of that. I just wanted to tell some real stories about real people. So that's what I started doing. I mean, I just love the people. I grew up working class Tucson. I discovered that at a really tender age that when you go really fast on a bicycle, it creates endorphins. By 12 and 13 years old, I was beating like 25-year-olds on bikes and races. And by the time I was 15, I was on the U.S. junior national team and living at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. But I think it had a lot to do with that depression because I was running, literally cycling away from it. But we lived there, right here. I was growing up, quiet and cool, little sedate, suburban East Side Tucson neighborhood. As soon as I quit racing bikes, I discovered alcohol. I discovered punk rock and discovered alcohol. I'm like, hey, that's my high school. I went for not even 2 years. My English teacher at Saguaro was like, man, you gotta read Walt Whitman. I'm like, Whitman? Why would anybody try to get a 14-year-old to read Walt Whitman, man? Oh, won't you come with me? I'm a DC-10. I became a rock and roll singer because I just felt like that's what I had to do. That's probably the only thing I did consciously. What we really thought we were going to be was famous. People magazine picked us to be stars of the future. And we had managers and lawyers and agents telling us we were going to be huge. It just never happened. But we were kids. We believed it. When it didn't happen, it was crushing. Somehow it went from music for a living to writing for a living. My launch into my literary career, I was writing porn movie reviews, and at that time I discovered crystal meth. Crystal meth and porn was like the thing that nearly killed me. I'm lucky to be here. And it also taught me how to like turn a phrase. I couldn't stop drinking, and I remember saying to myself, well, I'm gonna stop drinking when I get to Detroit. I went to Detroit in 2002. And that's what I did. I stopped drinking in Detroit, and it nearly killed me because my alcoholism was out of control at that point. And I nearly died when I detoxed, and it was horrible, and I haven't been drunk since. 13 years I worked at one newspaper, and they said, we can't afford to keep you on, really sorry. And they laid me off in, well, 2013, it's been 5 years. And that's when I wrote my book, because I didn't have a job anymore. I'm like, I gotta do something. And I came home, essentially. I mean, I could have gone anywhere else, but I chose Tucson. And I didn't commit suicide. In fact, I wound up really falling in love with the place again. Spence States came out, and it was going to be a total flop, and I was terrified it was going to be a complete flop. Because it's a small press, he didn't have much money. I met this woman, she's now my wife, funny enough. We hired her on as publicist for the project. And she went out and she found these young film directors in Los Angeles to do a trailer, essentially, for each story.
He has such a great sense of place in his writing and such a distinct tone and atmosphere. Probably informed by that brassy light and melancholia, that I really wanted to see it on film.
That generated so much interest in the book. it just basically took off. We sold thousands of those things, thousands and thousands of copies. And for a collection of short stories for an unknown author, it's unheard of.
Watching that just explode was pretty cool. And watching Maggie come into his life and that take him into another direction too that I don't think he expected was pretty wonderful too.
That book changed my life. It's just a small little collection of like drug out little stories. For some reason, I got a lot of respect for it. That guy's amazing. With the big gulp and the tattoos. Did you see him? I bet he has a million great stories. For me, like storytelling and writing, and all of it is empathy. That's the word of the day, the year, the century, empathy. And writing can't happen without it. And for me, when I moved back to Tucson and started doing these columns, it was for a way to exercise true empathy, writing about these people. These stories, they started piling up, and it became sort of a story of America.
In Tucson, there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of racism. There is a lot of injustice. And there's a lot of folks out there that think it's like a progressive utopia. For a lot of folks, that's not the case. And Brian tells the stories of a lot of those people.
We got a publisher in the UK interested. The book is a collection of essays and stories based on the columns in the Tucson Weekly. And now there's a documentary based on the book. My wife, who's also a filmmaker, directed the thing.
I began my day like this. I get up, set this.
There's something about him that people find like that they're willing to open themselves up.
I got a shot right here in the stomach.
It does take special writers to do that.
I really fell in love with Brian because when I started reading his columns, I heard his tale of like how he wanted to commit suicide and everything and kind of chose to stay here, and I saw that he sort of chose to stay here because he wanted to make art, and the art he's choosing to make is helping people tell their stories, and I thought that was so honorable.
I've suffered with depression and alcoholism and stuff, and it's not like, oh, I was just looking for a good time to get drunk. No, I was drinking and doing drugs to keep from being depressed, and so my point is I'm really grateful to be here.
As many as 1 in 7 women experience debilitating symptoms of depression during or after pregnancy. 1 in 5 postpartum deaths is due to suicide, now the second leading cause of death among new mothers. Lack of mental health support can cost new mothers their lives, and that's why an Arizona psychologist is on a mission to find out what moms need for lasting resilience and well-being.
When I first had Brooks, so that was almost 4 years ago now, oh boy, my postpartum experience was completely different than what I had in mind that it would be. We see all these highlight reels of the newborn babies and the moms that are smiling, and everybody looks so happy, and it's like it's all magical and it's gonna be good. And yet emotionally I was very anxious, super anxious. I mean, I have family close by and they're so helpful, and yet still on a day-to-day basis we can feel very alone.
When feelings of postpartum anxiety and isolation overwhelmed her, it caught Brianne Michael by surprise. Yet her experience isn't unusual among new moms.
The most common complication of giving birth is mental health issues. We screen every single mom every single mom, if you've been pregnant, anybody of you that's been pregnant knows you got to pee on a stick every time you go to a doctor's office, and they're checking you for ketones. They're checking your vitals because they're worried about diabetes. They're worried about hypertension. But like those are like 3 to 5% risks, whereas risk of a postpartum mood disorder or anxiety disorder, we're looking 15 to 20%. And the problem is we don't think of these as fatal illnesses, but they are. They are fatal illnesses. People die.
While maternal death rates have declined by more than a third since 2000 everywhere else in the world, U.S. rates have jumped more than 25%. Mental health plays a part in this public health crisis. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in new mothers, and the complex pressures of new motherhood can make it hard to seek help.
There's always the sense of, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not sure, but there's this expectation that you should know what you're doing. It challenges you on the very core of who you've defined yourself as. Nobody talks about that.
That's where psychologist Sunia Luther comes in. She wants to change how people talk about motherhood and how mothers talk to each other.
And it hit me a lot harder than I thought it would. And then, you know, when my kids get upset with it, then that's really hard.
This is Authentic Connections, a program Luther developed to help mothers build networks of support that strengthen their resilience, their ability to adapt to adversity in a positive way.
Think of it as a book club, except that you know where women get to after the second glass of wine? We just get there automatic. We just get right to it. So getting to the nitty-gritty, to the real stuff, without messing around with it, and we have 3 months of that. That's pretty wild, isn't it? 3 months, once a week, where you have those real, deep, authentic connections.
As a little girl in India, Luther set out to become a child psychologist. Her dream led her to the U.S. and to research on childhood resilience. That's where she noticed a missing piece in the science.
Basically, what child development experts would say is what kids need is for moms to function well, which is fine and good, except the story ended right there. There wasn't an investigation of, so what happens here? What helps moms to function well? So that started the investigation of understanding who mothers mommy. How do we make sure that mothers get tended themselves?
Through a series of studies, including a survey of more than 2,000 women, Luther discovered 4 factors that boost maternal resilience and well-being.
One of them was this unconditional acceptance. I feel seen and loved for the person I am. A second was, when I'm in need, there is comfort for me, dependable comfort. A third was satisfaction with friendships. And a fourth was what we call congruence. The person I am in my everyday life that people see is the same person that is deep within me. So it was basically a congruence, authenticity. I am authentic. I am myself in my everyday life. These 4 things, simple things, these are huge. Applaud that and do it. Well done.
Luther developed a model for facilitating groups that foster those 4 factors. And then, in 2016, she tested it out on a group of Mayo Clinic health professionals who were all mothers.
They showed improvements in pretty much everything: depression, stress, parenting stress, feeling loved, and even on the stress hormone cortisol. And what's more, the benefits were even greater 3 months after the intervention was over. So this was not sort of flash in the pan while the groups are running, you know, it's all good, and when they're done, it's over.
One of the things I really struggle with as a person is it's like, I really like meaning and depth and realness, and I feel like I have a place where I can feel those things and have those things is so enriching for me.
Brian Michael joined one of Luther's groups out of professional curiosity. She runs a business that teaches stress reduction techniques. But she found the relief and support she didn't realize she needed.
One of the things that I would notice, which was kind of surprising after I would come home from the meetings, is how much more loving I would be, how much more patient I would be. It's like, and that wasn't intentional, like I was trying to shift that. It was just that with that experience of feeling loved and supported, my heart was more open to offer that to my own kids.
I'll tickle them. Every time you put your foot in my face, I've got my tickle hand.
It's about creating these networks that exist for women as they do this, that they can call upon like this. Say, I'm hurting, I'm sad, I'm flailing, I'm shaky. Somebody hold me metaphorically. And there that person is. And it's not fake and it's not phony, it's real, it's loving, it's gentle. So for me, God, what a gift. It's like magic watching this happen.
Lori?
Hey, Nikki, how are you?
Oh, there you go. Okay, hi.
How you doing?
Now Sunia Luther is working to spread authentic connections across the country, training other facilitators and even setting up virtual groups.
I actually think it'll be very effective in the sense that it does focus on a couple of key factors, right? It focuses on educating, normalizing, destigmatizing. And then the cool thing about her groups is also that she's pairing moms with the similar cohort. So if you have a STEM background, she'll pair them with a STEM background, which kind of also helps them have that, this is my group. These people get me. I just don't know how easy it'll be to recruit because stigma is still there, judgment's still there. I am not a priority because I'm a mom and I have to take care of everybody else. I am the caregiver. I am not the care receiver.
Removing those barriers requires the kind of change that runs deeper than raising awareness or changing any individual mom's mind.
I have patients that really needed to take time off after having a baby, and I talked to them and I was like, look, we're already struggling. Time off will help in terms of your mental health. Regardless of if you've had a history, you need that time off. And they were like, well, if I want to feed my other kids, I have to go back to work. That is just, there's no arguing that. It's not a system that is set up for you to succeed. You struggle, somehow you succeed. You struggle again when you have the second baby.
Connections are not optional. They are essential. What we all need is love. And now you've got a way that you figured out how to do it in a pragmatic, in a feasible, scientifically based way. Let's just do it. That's it.
Thanks for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. See you next week.